I noticed that many of you guys are still using drawing pad for your final work. I know it's online class, so I cannot quite tell which paper you're working, but it's better to final artwork on Bristol, which is actually more smooth and more steady. And this may be always good for your final artwork, okay? Rather than this drawing pad, okay? So, or sketch pad. Let's make 8 by 8 inch square on this. And depends on how big your Bristol is. This is actually 14 by 11. So 14 minus 8, what is that? 14 minus 8?
6.
6, okay, 6 divided by 2. From each side here. And 3, 3. Okay, and then 11 minus 8, I'm sorry, right? Okay. All right, so 1.5. Okay. All right, so what I just drew is 8 inch by 8 inch square on the middle of the page. My Bristol was small this time. If you have a bigger Bristol, it should be different size, right? Okay. I mean, still 8 by 8. Okay. You have a different paper margin. Okay. So now, this 8 by 8, what's the half of 8? 4. Is that right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm asking very simple math here. So you, again, like last time, you make a center divider here. Okay. So what you do is very simple. Your thumbnail sketch was 4 by 4, and this is 8 by 8. So anything you actually did has to be double. We are not using grid transfer method. We are just using measurements. So look at this one as the thumbnail sketch. And if you measure this, say here I have 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch square. In that case, here I have to double it. So that means I have to draw 1 inch square. And in that case, you're also doing that for both sides equally, right? So draw 1 inch square on exactly opposite side. Yeah, so I just drew 1 inch by 1 inch by 1 inch square on both. Okay, and I can draw, for example, this square on the bottom, and that's a little bit over 1.25 inch. 1.25 inch. So double size of 1.25 is 2.5, right? So 2.5 here. Two and a half here. Hold on, I made a mistake. 2.5, right? 2.5. 1, 2.5. Okay, so I just drew this 1.25 inch square on Bristol. Now it's 2.5 by 2.5. Okay, let's draw this diamond shape here. It's 45 degrees tilted square. And if I count that, that's 1 inch here. So I can draw 2 inch The same thing here. Okay, and so I have to draw this line here. And that's actually, it's a little bit smaller. 3 inch here. So I have to make sure that's 6 inch here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the same thing, 6 inch here. To draw this line. Okay, so whatever you do has to be double and applied here. How about circle, right? Circle you have drawn with a compass, and don't use some something that cups and that lids and stuff. But ideally, if you have compass, say you have to double it. For example, this circle here is from the center. Just measure it. What was my measurement? This is that was about 1.5 inch diameter. Right? 1.5 inch. So it has to be 3 inch diameter for the actual size. Right? Okay, and then position wise, that was exactly in the center. So from 4 and just draw this. Ah. Slippery here. Okay, so you can do for the using compass, always whatever you draw, you measure on this, size has to be double, right? Here is 1 3/8. 1 3/8. Double of that is 2 3/4. Gosh, don't you like those inch system here? If you're confused, you can use a matrix instead. Why US is using this inch system here? What other country has that? How about Japan? Japan use an inch. How about Iran? Do you know? How about any other countries use inch and all these? Only US? What else? But you know, sometimes it's confusing. I'm not from here, but I've been starting to used to inch system, but it's still confusing sometimes. Anyway, so if you use a matrix system, that's fine. Whatever you do here, you measure here, you have to be double for final work. Okay, so once it's pretty much done, let's talk about how to finalize by Micron and Sharpie, right? So let's see. I think it's better to use both Micron and Sharpie, both of these, okay, rather than only using this, because Sharpie, you may not go into you cannot make a very good corners. It's not as sharp. It's not as fine as Micron, okay? So I like to use a Micron for outline and then shading with Sharpie at the end. Okay, so let's talk about, for example, here is, let's see, which one shall I do? Okay, here I have white here, so I should make this one to be black, right? So it's good to use a ruler for edges. And I know it's a little bit difficult for making a nice curvature without compass. Just I want you to be very careful. Okay. And I normally go outline with Micron, all these corners. Yeah. And I often see people start to smudge ink by using ruler. Sometimes that becomes frustrating. One trick I can recommend is some ruler have beveled edge. It's beveled. Sometimes bevel side down, that avoids the ruler touching the inked surface. Okay, so that's the one thing Japanese manga artists in the old days before digital age, Japanese manga artists actually use that technique. So ruler doesn't drag the ink on the paper. Okay, so once you start to have enough ink around the edge, then you can use a Sharpie to fill in the shading. I know Sharpie has slightly different color of the black, But if you use everything by micron, it may take a lot of time. Okay, I'm gonna do probably one more. This should be black, right? So enough edges and corners done by micron. But then you could be keep going with micron, but it takes forever. So Sharpie kicks in. For shading inside. I'm a very sweaty guy, so I always have I have a sweaty hand. So always I try to have another sheet of paper. So my hand is not really touching the Bristol. Just you have to think about not leaving that much fingerprints around. Again, this is a digital online class, and probably I won't get to see your actual piece, but it's good to keep it neat without your fingerprints. Okay, so I hope this one kind of give you idea what's happening, what's needed before you finalize your image. Okay. Okay, one thing I'm gonna warn you now is just wait about the framing outside. Sometimes it's good to keep nice implied framing rather than actual framing. Okay, so if it's a white shape, you may just leave it without having actual line. Okay, sometimes you wanna make it final. Leave it for final decision. You want to have implied framing or you have actual framing to outside. Okay. All right.